Note, because my copy of Rival Caesars is badly printed, misprinted even, with one section of the book upside down, literally, and backwards. Um, this is a small continuation of Chapter 1 that I didn't at first realize. It's a continuation of Chapter 1, the beginning of Chapter 2. Chapter 1 ended with this small poem. I dream of an empire as great and prouder than Rome of old, with its temples and towers of fate, its eagles of war and gold. Then the two bosom friends walked down the stairs to the front door and cordially bade each other good-bye, the unwounded man saying, "Well, we meet again next Thursday night at Judge Livingston's. Yes, and in the meantime let us think over whom we are to invite to join us. It is of great importance that we should select only trustworthy men. As I pass the doctor's house I will call and send him up to dress your wound," said the unwounded man. "Thank you, my dear friend," answered the other. Thereupon he of the bandaged arm, fair hair, and pink complexion walked musingly upstairs to his room. Seating himself by the table whereon the oath of brotherhood was written, he picked up the pen in which the signature had been made, looked at it cynically, saying half aloud, "But I will be the Caesar, Mr. Aaron Burr." Almost at the same instant of time the other man, he of the deep, dark, dazzling eyes, walking rapidly toward Broadway, was thinking and saying to himself, "But I will be the Caesar, Mr. Alexander Hamilton." Now we proceed to Chapter 2, The 8-Day Clock. Begins with this small poem. Oh, there's nothing half so sweet in life as love's young dream. There Galahad sat with manly grace, the kindly grandeur on his face. There Meralt of the iron mace, and lovelorn Tristram there. A week after the events related in the last chapter, a birthday party was given at Judge Livingston's. Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton were both present, together with a number of other young men about town. By far the larger proportion of them had arrived early, attended by their lady relatives. The evening passed most enjoyably. With music and dancing and the usual love glances, inseparable from all such gatherings. The birthday celebration, however, was being used for a double purpose. Under the outward show of social pleasure and family entertainment, a revolutionary lodge was to be formed, a lodge that afterwards played the chief role in all the memorable events leading up to and connected with the War of Independence. The disguise of the social gathering was adopted at the shrewd suggestion of Chancellor Livingston, he who afterwards swore in General Washington as first President of the United States. In 1775, the secret agents of the King's government were employed in large numbers to shadow prominent businessmen known or suspected of dissatisfaction to the government. As the hours rolled on, the male element gradually disappeared from the dance hall and supper room, leaving the women to themselves. Burr and Hamilton, however, stayed until the very last, as if with design. Now, women find little pleasure in the society of women, and therefore the disappearance of the men caused a certain element of dullness to come over the assembly. Betsy Schuyler, daughter of Colonel, afterwards General Schuyler, sat disconsolately upon a low-cushioned stool, while the two Miss Reneslers, her cousins, were holding a gossiping conversation nearby with Miss Morton and Miss Leah Roosevelt, all of whom were members of New York's leading merchant families. Betsy looked around, and then it suddenly dawned upon her that there was not a man left in the room except Judge Van Horn, an old friend of her father's. He was busy expounding the intricacies of the new dance of the Sir Roger de Coverley type to Miss Alexander, the daughter of Lord Stirling. Now Miss Betsy was filled with an irresistible spirit of curiosity. Whatever happened to be hidden from her, that she rightway desired to fathom with passionate eagerness. Where have they gone? What is the matter? She whispered to her sister Catherine. Mr. Burr and Mr. Hamilton were both here just now. Why, we've not a solitary soul to dance with. No, not one. I saw them go. They all stepped out one by one, said Catherine. I saw Alec beckon the magic prince, and they went off together through the side door. I see you are deeply interested in Mr. Burr, Betsy. Yes, said Betsy frankly, and her large good-natured eyes lighted up. I like him and Mr. Hamilton, too. But where have they gone to, I wonder? It seems so strange that they should all disappear so suddenly, every one of them. I suppose, replied Catherine, it is something about these horrid politics, the king, the riots, and the taxes. When the men leave us, everything becomes dead and dull. There is no company if there is no man. And then the men are so dreadfully selfish. How I wish I was a man, said Betsy. Then she began to lilt in an undertone, and her voice was sweet and very pleasing. All is dull about the house, the world is drab and grey. There's no more luck about the house when the men are gone away. I like those dear, delightful old melodies, Betsy. They are so pleasing and naive, and so truthful and so simple, too. Anyone can understand them, but the clever new songs seem so false and strained and hollow and dreadfully pretentious. Songs should be simple and pathetic and make one feel generous and noble thoughts. Oh, I wish I could write songs, Betsy. So do I, answered Betsy. You are so true and loving a sister, I am sure you could not but write charming and beautiful lyrics. Suddenly Betsy arose, saying vehemently, while tossing out her lustrous wavy hair, Catherine, I wish I was a man. At that Catherine held up her hands in amazement, saying, You mad girl, you! Why do you wish that for? Why, I'd gird on my father's pistols, answered Betsy, laughing, and ride away to the wars on Jupiter. Jupiter was her favorite saddle horse. Why, what put that crazy notion into your head? I always thought it, Catherine, but didn't know how to say it before. Then how did you learn? Inquired Catherine. Your head is full of wild things. Why, I just read a poem about it this morning in an old London magazine. It's fine, Catherine. I know you'll like it, too. It is called If I Were a Man. Let me see it, urged Catherine with increasing curiosity. Betsy fumbled in the folds of her dress and pulled out a small square fragment of smoky-colored paper. Upon it the following two verses were printed in old-fashioned type, wherein every F was an S. Far off from this fair false dower, this glamour of mart and stage, I would fly to the plains of power, and the conqueror's scarlet page. And there, as in days supernal, I would battle my life away, for the warrior lives eternal, but the dreamer dies in a day. Lady Helen. But the warriors don't live any more, Betsy, said Catherine, after reading the poem. They're all dead and buried in books, you know. Now, by the way, I heard your magic prince declare this very afternoon in conversation with Father, the reason there are no great poets and writers now is because there are no great deeds or heroes to write about. The world is becoming tame and sad and dreary. And what did Papa reply to that? Papa thought there were some heroes still, but that their greatness is somewhat obscured by popular illusions, or their activity strangled by untoward circumstances. Mr. Burr contended, however, that there is no field of activity for great men without the coming of great wars, great struggles, and great revolutions. Also that the true hero could not be obscured, nor his genius strangled. Father again replied that in the colonization of America there is still a superb arena for the display of aggressive heroism. The field of action is ever the same. America today, said he, is even as Europe was in the days of King Arthur and Beowulf. It is just being opened up, therefore the heroic age has not passed away. Perhaps, replied Mr. Burr, but where are the heroes? Which do you think right, Catherine? I know you delight to read those dear old stories of how our forefathers loved and fought and died. I think the magic prince was nearest right, but father was certainly not wrong. There must be great afflictions and sorrows and forlorn hopes to bring out the best that is in men. Tranquillity and fatness makes life awfully dreary, Betsy. It is the overcoming of dangers and difficulties that make heroes. Catherine, do you know what I think? No. I think Mr. Burr and Mr. Hamilton are going to be real live heroes. You see, they are not like other young men, no, not a bit. All the others whom we know are so dreadfully commonplace, urged Betsy with girlish enthusiasm. They haven't an idea in them, and then they make love so ridiculously, too, simpering like girls and so timid. You are right, Betsy. Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Burr are not like other men, and what is more, I suspect we are going to have a big war soon. There is a whole lot of plotting going on and talk of a rebellion. Mother says the house is full of powder and shot. Then I am certain they will become famous, said Betsy. They will do great deeds, both of them, I am sure. They will lead regiments and ride boldly, just as it is in the history books and the pictures, and the common people will cheer them, and the flags will fly so gaily, and the drums will roll so grandly. Oh, it will be so fine, Catherine, won't it? And we will wave our kerchiefs to them from the balconies as they ride past prancing proudly in triumph. How jolly it will all be! Oh, my, I wish it would come. But they will get killed or perhaps wounded, said the more thoughtful Catherine. The king has many soldiers. Then I would cry my eyes out and lay flowers on their graves, or nurse them back to health, and I would never speak to a king's soldier again. No, never. Then I would cry my eyes out and lay flowers on their graves, or nurse them back to health, and I would never speak to a king's soldier again. No, never. To which Catherine replied, I am also tired of merely reading in books about the great lover, great hero, the great prince. I long to see him in the flesh and blood, even as you do. Yes, I know you do, Catherine. You are always dreaming of great old days when men were as true in love as they are bold in war, when they went out to carry off the one maiden of their choice against all opposition, and dared to do valiant things against wicked kings. Oh, how I wish I was living in those dreadfully romantic old times. It would be grand, delightful. Wouldn't it be fine to marry a great man, Catherine, and be like a princess? Yes, it would, Betsy, but where is the great man? Where is the Prince Charming, the conquering hero? Oh, he'll come, answered Betsy, laughing joyously. But what if he doesn't come? Oh, he'll come, I know he'll come, I'm sure of it. He's here now, I think, but we won't know him for sure till after the great deeds are done. Betsy, I don't know what to make of you. He may not come till we are too old. Oh, don't talk so dreadfully, Catherine. The world is so beautiful yet. Betsy, answered Catherine, as with a sudden inspiration, I do believe you are right. Those grand old times will return. Something tells me. Oh, how I wish they would, said Betsy. There are no more mere reading and singing about knights and warriors and valiant kings of men, but living right alongside of them and loving them and assisting them and suffering for them too. Yes, I do wish a great struggle would come, Catherine. I want to find me a man and a king, and I know you do too. I will never marry one who is not brave and bold and famous and successful. Betsy, you're an awful little pagan. You don't hide your feelings a bit. You should be more reticent, Betsy. Besides, if no war comes, how can you know your hero? Why should I be more reticent, Catherine? I am only talking to you, and nobody is listening. It's not the fashion, Betsy, that's all I know. But like you, I also wish that my husband should be manly and bold, strong and great. I don't like those sleek, namby-pamby sort of men who've no daring in them. A woman should be good and true, and a man should be strong, bold, and full of spirit. I tell you what we'll do, said Betsy jokingly. You and I shall marry Mr. Burr and Mr. Hamilton between us. I know you like them both as much as I do, but you don't say it, you dear deceiver, you. Now, for goodness sake, be quiet, Betsy, said Catherine, blushing furiously. Whereupon Betsy arose, saying, I think I'll go out and see where the men have gone to. It's as solemn as a funeral in here since they all went away. "Oh, don't, pray don't," answered Catherine impetuously. "Father would be very angry with you for doing such a thing. You've often heard him say that well-bred ladies should never inquire or hunt too much after the affairs of men, nor attempt to discover men's secrets. Men know and have to mix up in things women should avoid, he says, over and over again." "Nevertheless, I am going," said Betsy wilfully. "I can't stand those Van Rensselaer girls. They won't talk except you squeeze them. They're just like dolls, and the room is as dull as a church when the Reverend Salem Schmidt preaches." Now the men had gone out by a side door opening on a long dark corridor, and Miss Betsy followed. Perceiving a small swinging oil lamp hanging at one end of the passageway, she walked softly on tiptoe towards it, her head full of mischief and bubbling over with curiosity. A sort of strange instinct seemed to hurry her on. As she approached nearer to the light, however, a feeling of sudden apprehension, a shadowy sense of foreboding, fell upon her, for she beheld in the half-shadow beyond the light what appeared to be the seated figure of a weirdly strange, strong old man with a long white beard and a shining double-edged dagger lying across his knees. "I wonder," she thought, "who he is, and what he is doing here. I never saw him before, and yet I know everything and everybody in this house, for I played here when a little girl. When in New York it has always been my home. The curious old man by the door of the basement, what does it mean?" Just then through the door alongside of which sat the old man came a dull muffled sound, as of the shuffling of many feet and the falling on the floor inside of some heavy body. Whereupon the old man with the naked dagger arose from his seat and gave 2 distinct knocks upon the upper panel of the door with the iron hilt of his weapon. The knocks sounded bodeful of evil to Betsy. Immediately the shuffling inside ceased. All again was silent as the grave, except of the distant sound of what appeared to be the steady strokes of a hammer on a coffin, and a solitary voice intoning a prayer of incantation. "Oh," thought Betsy, as her heart beat wildly, "I know what it is now. It is a secret society, and all the men are in there, and the dance of tonight was only an excuse for them gathering together here to avoid arousing the suspicion of the government." Then a thought full of strategy came into her quick, teeming brain. "I'll go down the old hidden passage in the wall and look in. That will be fine. I'll see it all." Whereupon she turned and fled up the corridor. However, her presence had been detected by the suspicious old man, who was evidently acting as outer door guard. He immediately passed in a report through the hidden speaking tube that a something dressed in white had swept rapidly up the passage. At the same time he opened a cupboard in the wall and turned what appeared to be a large iron crank 5 times. Meanwhile, Betsy passed the drawing-room door and climbed the stairs to her own room. There she rapidly made some alterations in her dress, and climbing another flight of stairs, she entered a half-dark lumber room with a deep recess in the wall near the sunken fireplace. Betsy went into the recess and removed from the wall a set of shelves containing old books, manuscripts, Indian curiosities, etc., revealing an opening in the stonework about 2 feet square. Crushing herself through this opening, she found herself on the rungs of a rusty iron ladder let into the stone and leading upward at an inclined plane. Gathering her skirts tight about her, she moved swiftly through the dust and cobwebs as if perfectly familiar with the place. Often had she been through it in her childhood days. Presently she stood on what appeared to be a landing. Opening without hesitation a door on the left, she entered another dark passage. Down it she went to the end. Then, lifting a trap-door by a big iron ring, she descended another flight of stone steps and found herself in a small, dark alcove. Through the north wall of the alcove a curiously blended red light shone. It was the light from the lodge room shining through the glass panel of a large, old-fashioned 8-day clock. Betsy approached it stealthily. The clock was over 10 feet tall and fastened by iron bolts to the wall. Behind the clock and inside the alcove where Betsy stood were a number of cog-wheels and iron levers, all forming part of some curious old-fashioned machine. Betsy, with girlish activity, climbed over this mechanism and stepped into the interior of the clock, alongside of the great iron weights and swinging bronze pendulum. She moved cautiously so as not to disturb the swing of the pendulum. As she stepped in, however, a very slight change took place in the mechanism. The old rusty cogs seemed to move behind Betsy in the dark without her observing them. Chains fastened to the rear wall began to slowly tighten. Betsy climbed up inside the clock to where the light shone in. Here she found the coloring matter, frosted on the glass, had been on the lower corner, carefully scraped off as if by someone bent on the same purpose of curiosity as herself. Betsy balanced her body steadily and looked long and earnestly into the large room. In pure delight with herself thus, she thought, "Now I can see everything. There they are, every one of them. But I wonder what they do. I wonder what their secrets are." Just then, by command of the Supreme One, Aaron Burr repeated aloud the omnific word of the great Ing. Then the members of the lodge marched around the hall with right arms bare to the shoulder, and saluted the symbol of the Ing with their swords upon which there was blood. "Oh, this is delightful," thought Betsy. "This is quite an adventure. It is just like the magic storybook. Even the magic prince is in it too, and all in real life. How often I have heard old Judge Van Horn say, quote, 'Romance is a fool compared to fact.' And here I am hidden inside the old clock, and there my brothers within the weird secret lodge, together with my father, my cousins, the magic prince, and Alec. But those awful lamps with the light shining through the eye sockets in the grinning skulls, they are horrible. They make my flesh creep. And all the men have got their swords drawn and wine glasses in their hands, and there is blood upon, and their throats are bare. And what is that lying on the stone floor by the great hole in the flags? It makes me shudder." Here Betsy trembled violently, for she perceived what appeared to be the bodies of 3 men wrapped in red cloth, laying at the foot of the iron altar of the Ing, upon which stood the 3 amens, the iron cross, the bowl of red liquid, and the flaming scroll. Betsy continued to soliloquize. "I wonder what it means. Are those things on the floor dead men, or what are they? What is the blood for? What is the fire for? And the curious bright sword like brass sticking upright in the coffin, and the long coil of rope, and the yellow flag with the coiled snake, and the great red spear. Oh my, I'm getting frightened. I wish now I had not done this. I feel like a spy, like a very criminal." Presently Hamilton began to speak, and a sense of enchantment and calm swept hypnotically over her as she continued to listen to his very pleasing voice. Then came the terrific ritual and the awful oath of the Revolutionary Brotherhood, also the secret signs, the grips and words, the explanation of the reversible symbols, the interpretation of the flaming scroll, the saga of the iron Ing, the naked blades, the clinking of the glasses, the drinking of the and other things not to be mentioned to the ears of the non-instructed. Note, when it comes to certain passages like the drinking of the blank, there are 4 dots. I'm not sure what they are exactly referring to, if they're referring to the drinking of blood, or perhaps the drinking of something else, but it is blanked out. To continue. All of which Betsy heard and saw distinctly and treasured up in a very retentive memory to her dying day. It was only to be expected that the terrific and ancient ritual, the ritual that tamed the fierce souls of Gothic kings and Scythian conquerors, would have a somewhat cooling effect upon this impulsive Albany maiden. But Betsy was not an ordinary young woman, albeit there was a something daring. But Betsy was not an ordinary young woman. About her there was a something daring and romantic, tragic and ambitious. She was never satisfied with the humdrum. She longed to be more than her associates. In fact, she was not, quote, content with her lot, unquote. She felt there was something wanting in her life, though she did not know what it was. Almost unconsciously down deep in her heart she was searching for that undefinable partner of her being, without whose discovery no woman is complete. In fact, the old story was stirring in her soul. Now Miss Betsy was also a furious little rebel, and she therefore listened to the short speeches of Hamilton and Burr with beating heart and unlimited approval. When Burr concluded, she thought, "Oh, this is really lovely. I wouldn't have missed it for anything. Mr. Burr is a real hero. I could hug him and Mr. Hamilton, too. Why, they're all heroes. Yes, every one of them. Are they not plotting in secret to overthrow an evil king? How noble they look, so young, so brave, so valiant, so strong, sword in hand, swearing allegiance to their country's cause and vengeance on the wicked oppressor. Oh, I love them. I'd like to kiss every one of them. How Catherine would like to be here. I do declare the heroes have really come alive again. There they are, right before me. Why, now I see it all. Is not valor and ambition stamped on their brows? And then their speeches, how very unusual, and how yet divinely beautiful and full of manliness." And there's a footnote. Readers desirous of obtaining printed copies of these most extraordinary and remarkable speeches not hitherto known to exist, are hereby invited to communicate by letter with the author in care of publishers. The original manuscripts now lying before us are in the handwriting of Aaron Burr's only daughter and dated St. Iago, island of Cuba, 1814. But to continue. And then their speeches, how very unusual, and yet how divinely beautiful and full of manliness. Indeed, they speak like gods. How unlike the tiresome sentimentalism of that old fogey, the King's College professor, whom my uncle brings home to dinner sometimes. And then Mr. Burr with his glorious black eyes, how grand he is. What an air of natural distinction and pride that is about him. How beautiful to look upon. He is a veritable hero. I know he is a hero. I know. Alec Hamilton, I like you too, but the magic prince, he charms me very soul and fills me with dreams. How extraordinary and radiant he is, like an inspired prophet or knight of old going forth to lead his people in the wars. Aye, and when he lifts his sword to take that fearful oath, he does it with all the gesture and grace of a king. During all this time, the mechanism around and behind Betsy was moving quietly towards her. However, in the excitement of what she saw, she had failed to observe that the machinery had imprisoned her as in a trap. Presently she felt a pressure on her back and tried to turn round and escape, but could not. Straightway, much to Betsy's confusion, a strange clanging noise arose within the clock. The clanging sounded like the crowing of a cock. The sound had a magical effect on the members of the lodge. At the second crow, the lights went out and dead silence reigned in the lodge-room. Betsy, trembling with fear, wished herself 1,000 miles away. Meantime, the mechanism continued to work, and the pressure on Miss Betsy's back became more insistent. Then, from out the darkness, came the voice of the master of the lodge, her own father, saying, "An alarm from the evil one! To your steel, my brothers, to your steel! The hour is." The cock continued to crow vociferously. Then the trampling of many feet approached the clock in the darkness. Miss Betsy was in a cold sweat from fear of the unknown. On the iron altar within the lodge, the master's iron hammer rang angrily 3 times. Clang! There's a footnote. 1812, Theodosia Burr sailed from Charleston with her father's private papers in an armed privateer bound for New York. Though never again publicly heard of in the United States, she nevertheless lived until the year 1861. But that is another story hereafter to be told. End of Chapter 2. Rival Caesars by Desmond Dilg. Chapter entitled The 8-Day Clock.